The sound of a spoon tapping against a crystal champagne flute echoed through the ballroom, sharp and piercing, silencing the murmur of 300 guests. It was a sound that usually signals a toast, a moment of love and celebration. But as I sat there, clutching my purse with white-knuckled hands, I had a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach that this was not going to be a celebration. It was going to be an execution, and I was the one on the chopping block. My new daughter-in-law, Chloe, stood at the head table. She looked radiant in a dress that cost more than the house I raised my son in, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was a cold, predatory curve of the lips that sent a shiver down my spine. She gripped the microphone, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the metal mesh. Beside her, my son, Liam, looked down at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. He looked small. Despite his expensive tuxedo and the life he had built with these people, in that moment, he looked like a frightened child. Then, Chloe spoke. Her voice was sweet, like poisoned honey. She looked directly at me, pointing a finger across the crowded room, singling me out among the sea of designer gowns and tuxedos. She said words that made the air leave the room. She called me a burden. She called me a peasant in a palace. And then she laughed. What she didn't know, and what her arrogant father sitting beside me didn't know, was that the woman they were laughing at held the keys to their entire kingdom. They thought I was just the poor, widowed mother from the wrong side of the tracks. They had no idea that 48 hours ago, the ink had dried on a contract that made me their boss. But before I tell you how I wiped that smirk off her face and brought an entire dynasty to its knees, we need to go back. We need to talk about how a mother's love was twisted into a weapon against her, and how I finally learned to stop catching grenades for a son who was the one pulling the pin. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am Tina, and today I have a story that is going to make your blood boil and then, hopefully, make you stand up and cheer. It is a story about betrayal, about the secrets we keep to protect our children, and the moment you realize that sometimes family isn't about blood, it's about respect. If you have ever felt unappreciated or looked down upon, this story is for you. So, grab your coffee, settle in, and let's get into the details of this incredible saga. The morning of the wedding started with rain. It wasn't a soft, romantic drizzle, but a hard, gray downpour that seemed to wash the color out of the world. I remember standing by the window of my small hotel room, watching the water streak against the glass, distorting the view of the city skyline. I adjusted the collar of my navy blue dress in the reflection. It was a sensible dress. Elegant, I thought. I had saved for 6 months to buy it without dipping into my savings, wanting to look dignified for Liam's big day. I smoothed the fabric over my hips, trying to calm the nervous fluttering in my chest. This should have been the happiest day of my life. My only son, the boy I had raised alone after his father died in a factory accident 20 years ago, was getting married. I should have been bursting with pride. Instead, I felt a heavy, suffocating dread. It hadn't always been this way. Liam and I used to be a team. We were survivors. I worked double shifts at the logistics company, starting as a clerk and clawing my way up, studying at night, just so he could have the right sneakers, the right education, the right chances. And he had been a good boy. Sweet, attentive. But then he met Chloe. And then he met Chloe's family, the Harringtons. The Harringtons were old money, or at least they pretended to be. They were the kind of people who thought kindness was a weakness and that a person's worth could be measured by the label on their handbag. Slowly, over the last 2 years, I watched my son change. He stopped calling on Sundays. He started critiquing my clothes. He became embarrassed by our history, by the struggle that made him who he was. I turned away from the window and looked at the small gift box on the bed. Inside was an old pocket watch that had belonged to his father. It wasn't worth much money, but it was priceless to me. I had polished it until the silver gleamed. I imagined giving it to him, a moment of connection before he walked down the aisle. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Liam. "Mom, please don't come to the staging area before the ceremony. Chloe is really stressed and wants to keep the energy specific. Just go straight to your seat. Row 8. Row 8. Not the front row. Not beside him. Row 8. I felt a sting of tears, hot and sudden, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't cry. Not today. I picked up my purse and the gift box, taking a deep breath. He's just stressed, I told myself. Weddings make people crazy. He loves you. He's just trying to keep the peace. The venue was the St. Regis, a sprawling estate of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. As I walked into the lobby, I felt the familiar invisible wall that always seemed to separate me from Chloe's world. The guests were arriving in waves of silk and expensive cologne. I kept my head high, clutching the gift box like a shield. I found my way to the ceremony hall. The ushers, young men with earpieces who looked like Secret Service agents, checked my name against a list. One of them frowned, flipping a page, then flipping it back. "Name again, ma'am?" he asked, his tone bored. Mary Vance. "I'm the groom's mother," I said, trying to inject a little authority into my voice. He paused, looking at me, then down at the list, then back at me. There was a flicker of pity in his eyes that hurt more than rudeness would have. "Ah, yes, Ms. Vance, please, follow me." He didn't lead me to the front. He walked past the first few rows, past the aunts and uncles of the Harrington family, past the college friends. He stopped at the 8th row, on the far left side, behind a large floral arrangement that partially obstructed the view of the altar. "Here you go," he mumbled, and walked away before I could say a word. I sat down, the folding chair creaking slightly. I looked around. The front row on the groom's side was empty, reserved for immediate family. Who was more immediate than his mother? As the room filled up, I sat alone. No one from the Harrington side acknowledged me. I was a ghost in a blue dress. Then the music started. The heavy wooden doors opened, and Liam walked in. He looked handsome, devastatingly so, in his tuxedo. My heart swelled with that old familiar love. That was my boy. He walked down the aisle, smiling at the guests. As he passed my row, I leaned forward slightly, hoping to catch his eye, to share a smile. He looked in my direction, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. For a second, our eyes met. I smiled, a genuine. For a split second, our eyes locked across the aisle, and I felt a surge of hope. I smiled, the corners of my eyes crinkling, trying to project all the warmth and reassurance a mother can offer without saying a word. I wanted him to know that despite the 8th row, despite the cold shoulder, I was here. I was his rock. But then, Liam did something that felt like a physical slap. His gaze didn't linger. He didn't offer a subtle nod or a quick, nervous smile. Instead, his eyes glazed over. He looked right through me, as if I were a piece of furniture, a smudge on the wall, or worse, a stranger he had no interest in knowing. He turned his head sharply toward the front, fixing his posture, erasing me from his line of sight. The air in the church felt suddenly thin. I sat back in the folding chair, the wood digging into my spine. My hands were trembling slightly in my lap, clutching that small gift box so tight the corners were starting to dent. I looked down at my hands that had scrubbed floors, typed manifests until midnight, and held him when he cried over scraped knees and broken hearts. Now, those hands weren't even worth a wave. The ceremony began, a blur of Latin phrases and orchestral swells that felt overly theatrical. I tried to focus, to be present, but my mind was reeling. I watched Chloe walk down the aisle. She was undeniably beautiful, I'll give her that. But there was a sharpness to her beauty, a rigidity. As she reached the altar and took Liam's hand, I saw her whisper something to him. He stiffened, then nodded obediently. It was a dynamic I had seen too many times over the last year. She commanded and he complied. Then came the vows. This was the moment I had been dreading, though I didn't know why, until the words actually left their mouths. Chloe went first. Her vows were filled with references to their lifestyle. She promised to be his partner in conquering the world, to travel to the furthest corners of the earth with him, and to build an empire. It sounded more like a business merger than a marriage, devoid of tenderness. Then it was Liam's turn. My breath hitched as he began to speak. His voice shook slightly. "Chloe," he said into the microphone, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You are everything I never thought I could have. You are elegance, grace, and perfection. I promise to spend every day of the rest of my life working to be worthy of you, to prove that I belong in your world." A cold stone dropped into my stomach. Worthy. He didn't promise to love her. He didn't promise to cherish her. He promised to be worthy of her. As if he, the kind, intelligent, hard-working man I raised, was somehow inherently less than her because his last name wasn't Harrington. It broke my heart not because he loved her, but because he clearly didn't love himself anymore. He had bought into their narrative that money equals worth and lack of it equals failure. When the priest pronounced them man and wife, the applause was polite, restrained, exactly the kind of applause you'd expect from people who worry about wrinkling their suits. I clapped too, my palms stinging, forcing a smile that felt like a mask glued to my face. The transition to the reception was chaotic. The rain had stopped, leaving the ground wet and the air heavy with humidity. Guests were ushered toward the main ballroom of the estate. I walked alone, navigating the sea of strangers. I could hear snippets of conversation around me, talk of stocks, summer homes in the Hamptons, and which private school was accepting applications. I felt like an imposter, a spy in enemy territory. But I had a secret weapon, didn't I? A secret nestled in my purse next to the rejected pocket watch. My phone, with access to my corporate email. You see, what Liam and the Harringtons didn't know, what no one here knew, was that the little logistics job I had been working all these years had evolved. The company I started at as a clerk 20 years ago, Global Link Logistics, had grown. And I had grown with it. Through grit, night classes, and a terrifying amount of risk, I had risen through the ranks. When the founder retired last year, the board appointed me CEO. And just 3 days ago, Global Link had acquired a struggling manufacturing firm to expand our supply chain. That firm was Harrington Industries. I was technically Robert Harrington's boss. I owned the mortgage on this venue. I owned the debt on the car he drove here. But I hadn't told anyone. I wanted to tell Liam after the honeymoon, to surprise him with the security that his mother had made it. I wanted to see if they would treat me with respect before they knew I held the purse strings. The answer to that test was becoming painfully clear. I entered the ballroom for the cocktail hour. It was lavish, dripping with crystals and gold leaf. Waiters circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres that looked too pretty to eat. I took a glass of sparkling water and found a spot near a pillar, trying to stay out of the way. That's when I saw him. Robert Harrington, the father of the bride. He was holding court near the bar, a scotch in one hand, gesturing broadly to a group of men who hung on his every word. He looked the part of the tycoon. Silver hair, bespoke suit, a laugh that boomed with entitlement. I decided, against my better judgment, to try one more time to bridge the gap. For Liam's sake, I took a deep breath, smoothed my skirt, and approached the group. "Mr. Harrington?" I said softly during a lull in their conversation. Robert turned slowly, his eyes scanning me from head to toe before landing on my face. There was no recognition, only annoyance. "Excuse me?" he said, his tone flat. "I'm Mary, Liam's mother." I extended my hand. "We met briefly at the engagement party last year." I just wanted to say, the ceremony was beautiful. He didn't take my hand. He looked at it as if it were a dead fish I was offering him. Then he looked at his friends and let out a short, dry chuckle. "Ah, yes." "Mary," he said, not stepping closer. "Glad you could make it. I trust the travel arrangements were adequate? We didn't know if you'd be comfortable with the shuttle service, but we figured it was the most practical option for you." The shuttle service. He was talking about the bus they had rented for the out-of-town guests, while the Harringtons and the bridal party took limousines. I had driven my own car, a reliable 5-year-old sedan, but the assumption that I needed charity stung. "I drove, actually," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But thank you." "Right. Well," he turned his back to me, addressing his friends again. "As I was saying, the cost of the flowers alone was astronomical, but nothing is too good for my Chloe. We wanted to make sure the event had class." He emphasized the word class in a way that made it very clear he felt my presence was lowering the average. I stood there for a moment, staring at the back of his expensive suit jacket, fighting the urge to tell him that his astronomical flower budget was paid for by a line of credit from a bank that was currently reviewing his company's solvency, a review I had authorized. But I bit my tongue. Not yet, I thought. Not yet. I retreated to the corner, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and adrenaline. I scanned the room for Liam. I needed to see my son. I needed to give him the watch. I needed one moment of reality in this circus of pretension. I found him near the entrance to the kitchen, nervously adjusting his bow tie in a mirror. He looked pale. "Liam," I whispered, stepping up behind him. He jumped, spinning around. "Mom, you startled me. What are you doing back here? The guests are supposed to be in the main area." "I just wanted a second with you," I said, reaching into my purse. "I have something for you. Something from your father." I pulled out the velvet box and opened it. The silver pocket watch gleamed under the hallway lights. It was his grandfather's. I had it fixed. I thought, maybe you could wear it today, to have a piece of him with you. Liam looked at the watch. For a second, his expression softened. He reached out, his fingers grazing the cool metal. But then, he looked over his shoulder, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. "Mom," he said, his voice strained. It's really nice, but I can't wear it." "Why not?" I asked, confused. "Because, look at it. It's old silver. My cufflinks are gold. Chloe picked them out. It clashes. It doesn't fit the aesthetic." "The aesthetic?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "The aesthetic." I repeated the word, but it came out as barely a whisper, lost in the clatter of plates and the distant hum of the string quartet. I looked down at the silver pocket watch in my hand. It was warm from my grip, alive with history. It had ticked in my husband's pocket the day Liam was born. It had ticked in the waiting room when Liam broke his arm in the 3rd grade. And now it was being dismissed because it wasn't gold. Because it didn't match the cufflinks chosen by a woman who thought affection was a transaction. Liam shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes darting toward the ballroom entrance again. He looked like a man waiting for a bomb to go off. "Mom, please," he hissed, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "Don't make this a thing. Not today. Chloe has a vision for the photos. Everything has to be cohesive. You know how she gets." "I know how she gets," I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. "But I'm starting to wonder if I know who you are anymore, Liam." He flinched. For a second, the mask of the obedient groom slipped, and I saw the boy I raised, the boy who used to save his allowance to buy me birthday cards. His eyes welled up, just a little. "Mom, I just want everything to be perfect. I just want to fit in. Please, just put it away." Slowly, deliberately, I snapped the velvet box shut. The sound was small, a soft click, but to me, it sounded like a door slamming shut between us. "Okay," I said, sliding the box back into my purse. "I'll put it away. Go be perfect." He hesitated, looking at me with a mixture of relief and guilt, before turning on his heel and rushing back toward the head table. I watched him go, feeling a hollow ache in my chest where my heart used to be. It wasn't just disappointment. It was grief. I was mourning the living. I made my way into the ballroom, navigating the maze of round tables draped in heavy silk. I searched for my name card. Table 1, 2, 3. Those were near the dance floor, the prime real estate. I kept walking. Table 10, 12, still in the center. I kept walking. Finally, I found it. Table 19. It was tucked away in the far back corner, right next to the swinging double doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter burst through with a tray of filet mignon, a blast of hot, greasy air hit the back of my neck. And my table mates? They weren't family. They weren't even friends. I was seated with the wedding photographer's assistants and a few distant cousins of the Harringtons who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I sat down, placing my purse on my lap. I refused to let it touch the floor. The dinner service was a blur of excessive opulence. Waiters poured vintage wine that probably cost more per bottle than my monthly grocery budget. I stared at the crystal glass, watching the bubbles rise, thinking about the irony. Here I was, the CEO of the parent company that now owned this entire charade, sitting by the kitchen door like the hired help. Robert Harrington stood up during the main course. He tapped his knife against his glass, the sound that had started this whole nightmare narrative in my head earlier. The room fell silent. Robert puffed out his chest, his face flushed with expensive scotch and self-importance. "Welcome, everyone," he boomed. When my daughter told me she was marrying Liam, I told her she has a heart of gold for taking on a project. A ripple of polite, cruel laughter went through the room. I felt my face burn. He was calling my son a project, a fixer-upper. But in all seriousness, Robert continued, swaying slightly, we Harringtons value legacy, we value strength, and we value breeding. He paused for effect, looking around the room with a smug grin. We are thrilled to welcome Liam into the fold, and we are confident that with the right guidance, with our guidance, he will become a man worthy of the Harrington name. He raised his glass. To the happy couple, and to the merger of, well, let's call it a merger of potential and capital. The room cheered. I didn't. I sat stone still, my hand gripping the stem of my water glass so hard I thought it might shatter. A merger, I thought. Oh, Robert, you have no idea. The merger has already happened, and you're not the one with the capital. I watched Liam. He was laughing. He was laughing at the insults disguised as a toast. He was laughing at his own father-in-law calling him a charity case. That was the moment the sadness in me began to curdle into something else. It turned into a cold, hard resolve. Then it was Chloe's turn. She stood up, taking the microphone from her father. She looked like a porcelain doll, beautiful, cold, and breakable. She smoothed her dress and looked out over the crowd. Her eyes scanned the room, bypassing the hundreds of adoring faces, and landed, with laser precision, on table 19, on me. Thank you, Daddy, she cooed. You've always given me the best of everything. The best horses, the best cars, the best life. She paused, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. You know, she continued, her voice taking on a conversational, almost conspiratorial tone. People told me marriage is about compromise, about blending two families. But let's be honest. She laughed, a high, tinkling sound. Some things just don't blend. It's like trying to mix oil and water, or like trying to put a tiara on a farm animal. The room went deadly quiet. The air was sucked out of the ballroom. Liam has come so far, she said, looking down at him fondly, stroking his shoulder. He's shed so much of that old skin. He's learned how to dress, how to speak, how to be one of us. But we all know that you can't choose your family. She turned her gaze back to me. The spotlight seemed to follow her eyes, making me feel exposed, naked in my sensible navy dress. I tried, didn't I, Liam? She sighed dramatically into the mic. I tried to include everyone, but sometimes you just have to accept that not everyone belongs at the head table. As the old saying goes, she leaned in closer to the microphone, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that echoed in every corner of the room. You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of shock. 300 people turned in their chairs to look at the back corner, near the kitchen doors. To look at me. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The blood rushed to my ears, a roaring sound that drowned out the hum of the ventilation. A pig. She had just called me a pig in front of everyone, in front of my son. I looked at Liam. This was it. This was the moment. Surely he would stand up. Surely he would take the microphone from her hand. Surely he would defend the woman who had worked 3 jobs to put food on his table. I watched him. I watched his face. He looked at Chloe, then he looked at me. His face was red, his eyes wide with panic. But he didn't stand up. He didn't speak. He looked down at his lap, picked up his napkin, and dabbed the corner of his mouth. He did nothing. A few people at the front tables started to giggle, then a few more. Soon, a ripple of laughter spread through the room, fueled by the nervous energy and the bride's expectant smile. They were laughing at me, the mother of the groom, the pig at table 19. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a tether breaking, the tether that held my pride in check, the tether that bound me to the role of the silent, sacrificing mother. The tears that had been threatening to fall all day suddenly evaporated. The heat in my face cooled instantly. My hands stopped shaking. I sat up straight. I pushed my chair back. The metal legs scraped loudly against the floor, cutting through the laughter. The sound made heads turn back to me. I stood up. I didn't look sad. I didn't look embarrassed. I reached for my purse, the one holding the rejected watch and the phone with the emails that could destroy Robert Harrington's life. I looked directly at Chloe. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just stared at her with a look of absolute, terrifying calm. I saw her smile falter. I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She expected me to run out crying. She expected me to shrink. She had no idea that the pig was about to become the butcher. "Excuse me," I said. I didn't shout, but my voice carried clearly in the silent room. I began to walk, not toward the exit, but toward the head table. Click here to subscribe so you don't miss the moment the smile gets wiped off her face. The real wedding toast is about to begin. And trust me, they aren't going to like the taste of this champagne. The distance from table 19 to the head table was probably less than 50 yards, but it felt like miles. It felt like I was walking across a desert, every step heavy with the weight of 20 years of sacrifice that had just been spat on. The ballroom was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the soft clink of my heels against the polished parquet floor. Click, click, click. The sound was rhythmic, almost like a countdown. With every step, I felt a layer of my old self peeling away. The Mary who apologized for taking up space? Gone. The Mary who ate leftovers so her son could have the fresh meal? Gone. The Mary who was afraid to speak up? She died the moment that laughter started. I could feel the eyes of 300 guests on me. I saw their faces as I passed. Some looked horrified, their hands covering their mouths. Others looked curious, leaning forward like spectators at a car crash. A few, the friends of the Harringtons, still had smirks plastered on their faces, expecting me to make a scene, to cry, to beg for forgiveness for existing. But I kept my eyes fixed forward, fixed on the head table, fixed on Chloe, whose triumphant smile was starting to twitch at the corners, fixed on Robert Harrington, who was now frowning, looking more annoyed than concerned, and fixed on Liam, who was staring at his plate as if the answers to the universe were written in the gravy. When I reached the center of the room, right in front of the dance floor, I stopped. I wasn't going to go up to the dais. I didn't need a microphone. I had projected my voice across noisy warehouse floors for 2 decades. I could handle a silent ballroom. I looked at Chloe. She was still holding the microphone, but her knuckles were white. "You know," I began, my voice steady and clear, cutting through the thick tension. "There is an old saying where I come from, too." Chloe blinked. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. She hadn't expected the pig to speak. "It says, be careful who you step on while you're climbing up, because you might meet them on your way back down." I saw Robert Harrington scoff. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his scotch. "Oh, for heaven's sake," he muttered loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Someone get security. She's embarrassing herself." "Am I?" I asked, turning my gaze to him. I didn't yell. I spoke with the icy precision of a surgeon. "Am I embarrassing myself, Robert, or am I just inconvenient?" Robert's face reddened. He stood up, looking around for the venue staff. "This is a private event. Get this woman out of here." 2 security guards in black suits started to move from the side of the room. I didn't flinch. I just held up a hand, palm out, a gesture of absolute authority. "Stay right where you are," I commanded. My voice had the steel of a CEO, not a confused mother. The guards hesitated. They stopped. They looked at Robert, then back at me. They sensed it, that subtle, unspoken frequency of power. They didn't know why I had authority, but their instincts told them not to touch me. I turned back to the head table. I looked at my son. "Liam," I said softly. He finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, terrified. "Mom, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Just go." "I am going, Liam," I said. "I'm leaving. I wouldn't want to ruin your aesthetic any longer. But before I go, there are a few things that need to be clarified. Since we are sharing truths." I reached into my purse, not for a tissue, but for my phone. "You see, Chloe," I said, addressing the bride again. "You called me a peasant. You talked about your father's empire. You talked about wealth as if it were a virtue." I unlocked my phone and tapped the screen a few times. The light from the screen illuminated my face in the dim room. "It's funny," I continued, pacing slowly in front of the table, "because just this morning I was reviewing some interesting documents regarding a company called Harrington Industries." At the mention of his company, Robert froze. His hand, holding the glass, stopped mid-air. The color began to drain from his face, leaving it a sickly shade of gray. "It seems," I said, pretending to read from the screen, though I knew the numbers by heart, "that Harrington Industries has been operating at a deficit for 5 years. It seems that the empire is actually a house of cards, propped up by high-interest loans and, let's see, creative accounting." A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't just wedding drama anymore. This was scandal. This was gossip gold. "That's a lie!" Robert shouted, but his voice cracked. It was the shout of a desperate man. "Slander! I'll sue you!" "You can try," I said calmly, "but it would be unwise to sue your new boss." The silence that followed that sentence was heavier than anything before. It was a vacuum. "What?" Chloe whispered. The microphone picked it up, amplifying her confusion. "Boss?" Liam mouthed the words, staring at me. I took a step closer to the table. 3 days ago, Global Link Logistics acquired the majority debt and controlling shares of Harrington Industries. The acquisition was finalized on Friday at 4:00 p.m. I looked Robert dead in the eye. "I am the CEO of Global Link, Robert. I signed the acquisition papers myself. I own your debt. I own your factories. I own the mortgage on this building we are standing in right now." Robert dropped his glass. It hit the table, shattering, red wine spilling across the white tablecloth like a bloodstain. He collapsed back into his chair, gasping for air. "You," he wheezed. "You're Vance? M. Vance? That's you?" "Mary Vance," I corrected him. "Yes, the peasant." I turned to Chloe. Her mouth was hanging open, her perfect lipstick looking grotesque now. "So, you see, Chloe," I said, my voice dripping with the same sweet poison she had used on me. "When you called me a pig, you were actually insulting the woman who currently decides whether your father keeps his job on Monday morning." I watched the realization wash over her. It wasn't regret. It was fear. Pure, unadulterated fear of losing her status, her money, her world. Then, I looked at Liam. I expected him to be shocked. I expected him to be impressed, maybe. But what I saw in his eyes broke the last fragment of my heart that was still holding on. He wasn't looking at me with pride. He was looking at me with calculation. I saw the gears turning in his head. He was doing the math. Mom is rich. Mom is powerful. Mom is the winner. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over. "Mom!" he exclaimed, a sudden, desperate smile plastering onto his face. He rushed around the table, coming toward me with his arms open. "Mom! Oh my God, why didn't you say anything? This is amazing. Guys!" He turned to the crowd, gesturing to me like a carnival barker. "This is my mother, the CEO. Can you believe it? She's a genius. She pulled a fast one on us." He reached out to hug me. I took a step back. His arms flailed in the empty air. He looked hurt. "Mom? Don't," I said. My voice was low, vibrating with a pain so deep it felt like a physical wound. "Do not touch me." "But, Mom, it's me, Liam. I knew you had it in you. I always told Chloe, didn't I, honey? I always said my mom was a fighter." "You said nothing." I cut him off. "You let her call me a pig. You let them put me in the corner by the kitchen. You were ashamed of me, Liam. You were ashamed of the woman who scrubbed floors so you could have those teeth straightened. You were ashamed of the hands that built the company that just bought your freedom." I was just stressed. You know how it is." He was sweating now, the panic setting in. "It was just a joke. Chloe was joking. Right, Chloe?" He looked back at his wife for help, but she was too busy staring at her father, who was currently loosening his tie, looking like he was having a heart attack. "It wasn't a joke," I said. "It was the truth. It was the truth of how you see me. And now, I'm going to show you the truth of who I am." I looked around the room. The guests were mesmerized. "I am leaving now," I announced. "Enjoy the cake. I paid for it after all. Or rather, the bank did, on a credit line that I now control." I turned my back on them. I turned my back on the head table, on the sobbing bride, on the hyperventilating father, and on my son, who stood there like a hollow shell of a man. I started walking toward the exit. Click, click, click. "Mom, wait!" Liam shouted. I heard his footsteps running after me. I didn't stop. I walked through the double doors, out of the ballroom, and into the cool, quiet lobby of the estate. The air felt cleaner out here. I could hear Liam bursting through the doors behind me. "Mom, you can't just leave. We need to talk. What about the company? What about us?" I stopped near the large glass entrance doors. Outside, the night was dark, but the rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet earth and ozone. I turned slowly. Liam skidded to a halt a few feet away. He looked pathetic. "There is no us, Liam," I said. "Not right now. You wanted to be a Harrington? You got your wish. You're one of them now. Good luck." "But the money, Dad's watch," he stammered, grasping at straws. "The watch is in my purse," I said, clutching the strap tighter. "It stays with me. It belongs to a man who knew the value of loyalty. You don't deserve to wear it." I pushed open the heavy glass door. "Mom!" he screamed, his voice echoing in the lobby. "You can't do this to me. I'm your son." I paused, halfway out the door. I looked back at him one last time. "Yes," I said, a tear finally escaping and rolling down my cheek. "You are my son, and that is the only reason I'm not firing your father-in-law tonight. But Monday morning? That's a different story." I walked out into the night. I walked to my sensible sedan, unlocked it, and got in. As I turned the key in the ignition, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw Liam standing in the lighted doorway, a silhouette of regret. But as I drove away, down the long, winding driveway of the estate, the sadness began to fade. In its place, a cold, hard clarity settled in. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a CEO, and I had a business to run. And as I merged onto the highway, heading back to the city, my phone buzzed. It was an email notification. I glanced at it at a red light. It wasn't from Liam. It wasn't from the lawyers. It was an automated alert from my personal bank account. High-value transaction alert. $50,000 withdrawal initiated. I frowned. I hadn't spent any money. I opened the app. The withdrawal had been made 20 minutes ago. The location? An online transfer to an offshore account. The authorization code? Liam Vance. My blood ran cold. He had my passwords. He had my old access codes from when I used to help him with his college tuition. While he was hugging me, while he was playing the proud son, had he been distracting me? No, the timing. 20 minutes ago. That was during the speeches. That was while Chloe was insulting me. He had been stealing from me while his wife was humiliating me. The light turned green. I didn't move. A horn honked behind me. This wasn't just ingratitude. This was a crime. And suddenly, Monday morning seemed too far away. The car horn behind me blared again, a long, angry blast that vibrated through the chassis of my sedan. It was the sound of the real world intruding on my nightmare, snapping the invisible cord of shock that held me frozen at the green light. I pressed the gas pedal mechanically, my foot feeling heavy and detached, like it belonged to someone else. The car lurched forward, merging into the flow of nighttime traffic, but my mind was miles away. It was stuck on that screen, on that number, $50,000. It wasn't just a number. It was the down payment I had saved for a condo I hoped to buy one day. It was years of overtime. It was the safety net I kept just in case. But more than that, it was the ultimate violation. I drove for maybe 2 miles before the trembling started. It began in my hands, rattling the steering wheel, and spread to my knees until I could barely control the pressure on the accelerator. I couldn't drive like this. I spotted the neon sign of a 24-hour gas station and swerved sharply into the lot, parking in the darkest corner, away from the pumps. I put the car in park and killed the engine. The silence that rushed in was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic thrum-thrum of the rain starting up again on the metal roof. I sat there in the dark, the dashboard lights casting a ghostly green glow on my face, and I stared at my phone. I unlocked it again, praying I had misread it, praying it was a glitch. Transaction complete. Recipient, HI Holdings, offshore, authorized by User 2, Liam. I felt a physical wave of nausea roll over me. I leaned my head against the cool steering wheel, closing my eyes. User 2. I remembered the day I gave him that access. He was a sophomore in college, panicking because his financial aid hadn't come through for textbooks. I had added him to my account, given him a card, and said, "This is for emergencies, Liam. I trust you." He hadn't used it in 5 years. I had forgotten he even had the codes, but he hadn't forgotten. While I was sitting in the back of the room, being humiliated by his wife, while I was swallowing my pride, he was draining my accounts. He wasn't just a bystander to my pain. He was financing his new life with the very blood and sweat he was ashamed of. I sat up. The tears that wanted to fall were gone. In their place was a cold, hard knot of fury. I dialed the number on the back of my debit card. "Welcome to First National Bank. For fraud, press 1. I pressed 1 so hard my nail clicked against the screen. The hold music was a cheerful, light jazz tune that felt mocking in the cramped darkness of the car. I watched a stray dog trot across the wet pavement of the gas station lot, sniffing at a discarded wrapper. That's me, I thought bitterly, scavenging for scraps of affection while they feast. "This is Kevin in fraud prevention. How can I help you?" A tired voice answered. "My name is Mary Vance," I said. My voice sounded strange, raspy, but steady. "I need to freeze my accounts, all of them, immediately." "Okay, Ms. Vance. Can you verify your security question? What is the name of your first pet?" "Buster," I said automatically. Buster was the dog Liam had cried over when he died. "Thank you. I see the activity here. A transfer of $50,000 initiated 25 minutes ago. Was this authorized?" "No," I said. "It was theft. I see a secondary user authorized it with a valid PIN." "A Liam Vance? He is no longer authorized," I cut in, my tone sharp. "He stole that money. I want him removed. I want the transfer reversed." "I can flag it as disputed," Kevin said, the clicking of his keyboard audible over the line. "But since it's an offshore wire transfer, reversal is difficult. It might take weeks. We need to open an investigation." "And Ms. Vance?" "Yes?" "There was another attempt just 2 minutes ago, for another $20,000. It was declined for insufficient funds." My hand tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. Another attempt. He had drained the savings and then tried to scrape the checking account dry. He was trying to leave me with nothing. He was trying to bankrupt me while I was driving away. "Freeze it all, Kevin," I whispered. "Lock it down so tight that I can't even buy a pack of gum without a fingerprint scan. And if user 2 tries to access anything at all, I want a notification sent directly to me." "Consider it done, ma'am. Do you want to file a police report? For the amount involved, it's a felony." I paused. The rain hammered harder against the glass. A police report. My son in handcuffs. The image flashed in my mind. Liam being dragged out of his reception, the flashbulbs popping, Chloe screaming. It would be the ultimate revenge. It would destroy his reputation forever. "Ms. Vance." "Not yet," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I'll handle this. Internally. For now." I hung up. I wasn't saving him from the police because of mercy. I was saving him because I wanted to handle his punishment myself. The police would just give him a record. I was going to give him a lesson. I drove the rest of the way to my hotel in a daze. The Starlight Inn was a budget motel on the outskirts of the city. Another choice I made to save money that Liam had just stolen. I walked into the room, the smell of stale carpet and industrial cleaner hitting me. I threw my purse on the cheap bedspread and walked to the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different. The navy blue dress was wrinkled. My hair was starting to frizz from the humidity, but my eyes were clear. The softness was gone. The mother was gone. I sat down at the small, wobbly desk in the corner and opened my laptop. I connected to the hotel's spotty Wi-Fi and logged into the secure server of Global Link Logistics. I pulled up the acquisition files for Harrington Industries. I had skimmed them before, trusting my team's due diligence. Now I read them with the eyes of a predator. I looked at the payroll. Chloe Harrington, brand consultant. Salary, $150,000 year. Notes, no timesheets submitted, no deliverables on file. I looked at the expense reports. Robert Harrington, client development, $200,000 in travel expenses in Q1 alone. Notes, receipts indicate personal vacations in Cabo and the Maldives. And then I saw the newest edition, dated just last week. A pending contract, awaiting signature from the CEO, me, but already entered into the system by Robert as a done deal. Liam Vance, VP of Strategic Operations, starting salary $250,000 plus signing bonus. I let out a short, dark laugh. Strategic Operations. Liam had a degree in art history. He had never managed anything more complex than a Starbucks order. This wasn't a job offer. It was a payoff. It was an allowance disguised as a salary, funded by the company they thought was a bottomless pit. They were looting the ship before it even sank. I cracked my knuckles. It was 11 p.m. on a Saturday night. Most CEOs were sleeping. But I wasn't just a CEO. I was a mother scorned. I opened a new email draft. Subject: Immediate Audit and Personnel Review. I began to type. I typed with a speed and ferocity that surprised me. To HR Director, Harrington Industries. CC, Robert Harrington, Legal Department. Effective immediately, all discretionary spending accounts are frozen. All corporate credit cards are suspended pending review. The position of brand consultant is under review for redundancy. The offer for the VP of Strategic Operations is hereby rescinded. Furthermore, I require a full forensic accounting of the last 5 years of executive expenses on my desk by 8:00 a.m. Monday morning. Failure to comply will result in immediate termination for cause. Signed, Mary Vance, CEO, Global Link Logistics. I hovered my finger over the send button. Sending this would declare war. It would turn the happiest weekend of their lives into a bloodbath. It would likely end my relationship with my son forever. My phone buzzed on the desk. I looked at it. It was a text from Liam. Mom, where did you go? My card just got declined at the bar. This is embarrassing. Fix it. Now. He didn't know I knew about the $50,000. He thought the card decline was just a glitch on the account he usually leached off of. He was demanding I fix it. Fix it. Now. He wasn't worried about me. He wasn't apologizing. He was annoyed that the tap had run dry. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the send button on my laptop. You want me to fix it, Liam? I whispered to the empty room. Okay, I'll fix it. I hit send. The swoosh sound of the email departing felt more satisfying than any applause. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, at the St. Regis, phones were about to start buzzing. The party was about to end. But I wasn't. The message sent notification faded from my laptop screen, replaced by the stark white emptiness of my inbox. For a moment, the only sound in the cramped motel room was the hum of the mini fridge and the blood rushing in my own ears. I sat there, my finger still hovering over the trackpad, waiting. It was the feeling you get right after you light a fuse, that suspended second of breath-holding silence before the explosion. I didn't have to wait long. Less than 2 minutes later, my phone began to buzz against the laminate tabletop. It vibrated so violently it sounded like an angry hornet. The name flashing on the screen was Robert Harrington. I stared at it. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I took a slow sip of the lukewarm water from a plastic cup I'd filled in the bathroom sink. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to wonder, just for a few seconds, if his power had truly evaporated into the ether. On the 5th ring, I picked up. Mary Vance speaking, I said. My voice was calm, unrecognizable even to myself. It was the voice of the CEO, not the mother. What the hell do you think you're doing? Robert's voice exploded through the speaker, slurring slightly. He was clearly still drunk, fueled by adrenaline and scotch. I just got an alert from IT. My cards are declined. The company accounts are locked. My assistant can't even book my flight to the Maldives. You have no right. I have every right, Robert, I interrupted, cutting through his bluster like a knife through stale cake. Read your contract. Clause 4, Section B. In the event of financial irregularities or suspected mismanagement, the parent company reserves the right to freeze all discretionary assets pending an internal audit. Irregularities, he sputtered. I am the president of this company. My expenses are business critical. A week in Cabo San Lucas for team building with just you and your mistress is not business critical, Robert, I said. I could hear him choke on his breath. Yes, I saw the receipts. And the jewelry purchases charged to the manufacturing supplies ledger? Very creative, but sloppy. You've been spying on me? His voice dropped an octave, the anger replaced by a sudden, creeping fear. I've been doing my job, which is something you haven't done in years. I leaned back in the creaky motel chair. You have a choice, Robert. You can keep screaming at me, and I will forward these findings to the district attorney tonight. Or you can meet me for brunch tomorrow morning at the St. Regis, 9 a.m. sharp. Bring the company laptop, and bring my son. Mary, wait, let's be reasonable. I hung up. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a heavy, leaden exhaustion. My hands were trembling again, not from fear, but from the sheer toxicity of it all. It was like draining a boil, necessary, but sickening. Then the phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made my stomach turn over. Liam. I almost didn't answer. A part of me, the mother part, wanted to throw the phone across the room and curl up under the covers. I didn't want to hear his voice. I didn't want to hear the lies. But the CEO part of me knew that silence was a luxury I couldn't afford. I had to face the asset that had become a liability. I swiped green. Mom, what is going on? Liam sounded frantic, his voice high-pitched and whiny. It was the voice of a teenager whose allowance had been cut, not a 30-year-old man on his wedding night. Robert is freaking out. Chloe is crying in the bathroom because her card got declined for the after-party champagne. You have to fix this. It's humiliating. Humiliating, I repeated, tasting the irony. You want to talk about humiliation, Liam? Let's talk about table 19. Let's talk about the pig. Oh my God, are you still on that? He groaned. It was a speech, a joke. Why are you being so vindictive? I thought you were happy for me. And now I see you've... What? Canceled my job offer? Are you crazy? We have a mortgage approval pending on that salary. You don't have a job, Liam, I said quietly. You never did. It was a handout, a bribe from Robert to keep you compliant. It was a VP position, he shouted. It was a placeholder, I snapped, my voice finally rising. And speaking of money, tell me about the $50,000, Liam. There was silence on the line, a thick, heavy silence. The rain outside seemed to drum louder against the window pane. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, his conviction vanishing instantly. Don't lie to me, I whispered. Not now. Not when I can see the transaction log. You used my old password. You transferred my life savings, my condo fund, to an offshore account controlled by the Harringtons. While your wife was calling me a peasant, you were robbing me blind. It was an investment, he said quickly, desperate to spin the narrative. Robert said if I put up some capital, I could get equity. I was doing it for us, Mom. I was going to pay you back double. I just needed the liquidity tonight because the market opens on Monday and... Stop. Mom, please, you have to understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You stole from your mother to buy your way into a family that hates you. You paid $50,000 for a seat at a table where you're the joke. I am not a joke. You are to them, I said, my voice breaking with pity. And now you're a thief to me. Mom? He sounded small now, scared. Bring the laptop to brunch, Liam. 9 a.m. If you aren't there, I'm filing the police report for the theft. You wouldn't. Try me. I ended the call and turned the phone off completely. I couldn't take any more. I sat in the dim light of the motel room, listening to the drip of a leaky faucet in the bathroom. I looked around at the peeling wallpaper, the stained carpet. This was where I was sleeping, so I could save money for him. And he was currently in a suite that cost more per night than I made in a month, funded by my stolen savings. I didn't sleep that night. I laid on the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last 20 years of my life. Every packed lunch, every overtime shift, every "I'm proud of you." I looked for the signs. Where had I gone wrong? When had he become this person? Or had he always been this way, and I was just too blinded by love to see it? By the time the sun began to bleed gray light through the thin curtains, I had reached a conclusion. The Liam I loved was gone. Or maybe he was just buried very, very deep under layers of greed and insecurity. Either way, I couldn't save him by cushioning his fall anymore. I had to let him hit the ground. I got up at 7 a.m. I showered in the lukewarm water, scrubbing my skin until it was red, as if I could wash away the grime of the previous day. I put on the same navy blue dress. I didn't have a change of clothes. But today I wore it differently. I smoothed the skirt. I put on my lipstick, a shade darker than usual. I pulled my hair back into a severe, tight bun. I wasn't dressing for a wedding. I was dressing for a funeral, the funeral of my expectations. I checked out of the Starlight Inn. The receptionist, a bored teenager with headphones, barely looked up. "Checking out?" "Yes," I said. "I have a business meeting." I drove back to the St. Regis. The estate looked different in the morning light. The glamour of the night before had faded, leaving behind the stark reality of wet pavement and workers dismantling the floral arches. It looked like a movie set after the cameras stopped rolling, fake and hollow. I parked my sedan right in front of the main entrance, between a Bentley and a Porsche. The valet rushed over, looking ready to tell me to move. "Check-in is at 3, ma'am," he started. I stepped out of the car, tossing him the keys with a casual flick of my wrist. "I'm not checking in. I'm owning the place. Keep it close." I walked through the revolving doors. The lobby was quiet, smelling of fresh coffee and expensive lilies. I walked straight past the reception desk toward the garden room, where the post-wedding brunch was being held. I could hear the low murmur. The garden room of the St. Regis was an assault on the senses, specifically designed to simulate a paradise that didn't exist. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, illuminating the manicured ivy trellises and the oversized ferns that hung from the ceiling. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans, expensive perfume, and the faint, sweet scent of warm pastries. It was a setting built for leisure, for people who had nothing more pressing to do than decide between the smoked salmon and the eggs Benedict. I walked in, my heels sinking slightly into the plush Persian runner that lined the aisle. The room was buzzing with the low, polite murmur of Sunday brunch, the clinking of silver against china, the soft laughter of guests recounting the previous night's festivities. But as I moved deeper into the room, I wasn't looking at the buffet. I was hunting. I spotted them at a large round table near the fountain in the center. They stood out, not because of their glamour, but because of the palpable cloud of misery that hung over them like a localized storm front. Robert Harrington was slumped in his chair, his skin a pasty shade of gray that clashed with his crisp white linen shirt. He was nursing a Bloody Mary with a shaking hand, his eyes bloodshot and darting around the room as if he expected the FBI to repel from the skylights. Beside him, Chloe looked less like the triumphant bride and more like a petulant child who had been denied dessert. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and she wore oversized sunglasses indoors, hiding eyes that I suspected were puffy from crying over declined credit cards. And then there was Liam. My son sat on the edge of his seat, his posture rigid, staring at his phone as if willing it to give him good news. He looked exhausted. The boyish charm was gone, replaced by the hollowed-out look of a man who knows he's trapped. I didn't wait to be noticed. I didn't wait for a host to seat me. I walked straight to their table, the folder of printed emails and bank statements tucked under my arm like a weapon. As I approached, Liam looked up. His eyes widened, a flicker of fear mixed with relief crossing his face. "Mom," he breathed out, half rising from his chair. "Sit down," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a weight to it that made him drop back into his seat instantly. The conversation at the table died. Robert looked up, squinting against the sunlight. Chloe lowered her sunglasses to the bridge of her nose, peering at me with a mix of disdain and confusion. "You actually came," Robert muttered, his voice rough. "I thought you were bluffing." "I don't bluff, Robert. That's a gambler's game. And as we've established, you're the gambler. I'm the bank." I pulled out the empty chair directly across from Robert and sat down. I placed the folder on the table between us. The heavy thud of the paper stack made the silverware jump. "Coffee?" A waiter appeared at my elbow, holding a silver pot. "Black," I said, not taking my eyes off Robert. "Leave the pot." The waiter poured the coffee and retreated quickly, sensing the radioactive tension radiating from our table. I took a sip. It was hot, bitter, and grounding. "So," I began, folding my hands on top of the folder. "I trust everyone slept well?" I know I didn't. I was too busy reading the fascinating literature your accounting department sent over at 3 a.m. Robert winced. "Mary, look. Business is complicated. There are flows, cash flows. Sometimes you have to move things around to keep the engine running. Is that what you call it? I opened the folder to the first flagged page. Moving things around? Because according to this, you moved $200,000 from the employee pension fund to a shell company in the Caymans last month. That's not cash flow, Robert. That's embezzlement. Chloe gasped. Daddy, is that true? Robert turned on her, snapping, Quiet, Chloe. This is grown-up talk. You don't understand how finance works. She understands how shopping works, I interjected, turning my gaze to the bride. Don't you, Chloe? I see here that your brand consultant salary, $150,000 a year, has been paid out consistently for 3 years. Yet I couldn't find a single report, a single marketing plan, or even a timesheet with your name on it. Chloe flushed a deep, angry red. I consult. I give input on the vibe, the aesthetic. I told Daddy that the logo needed to be more modern. The vibe, I repeated deadpan. Well, I hope that logo is very modern, because it cost the company $500,000 over 3 years. As of this morning, the position of brand consultant has been eliminated. Your corporate card has been canceled. And I suggest you return the company-leased Range Rover by noon tomorrow, or I'll have it reported as stolen. Chloe's jaw dropped. You can't do that. That's my car. It's the company's car, I corrected her. And the company is cleaning house. I watched the reality sink in. For the first time, Chloe looked at me not as a nuisance, but as a threat to her very survival. She looked at Liam, expecting him to defend her. Liam, do something. She's taking my car. Liam looked at me, his face pale. Mom, please, let's not do this here. People are watching. Let them watch, I said, leaning forward. They watched you let her call me a pig, didn't they? They watched you laugh. I think they can handle watching a business meeting. I turned my attention to my son. This was the part I had been dreading. The anger at Robert and Chloe was easy. It was clean. The anger at Liam was muddy, mixed with a sorrow so deep it felt like drowning. Now, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Let's talk about my $50,000. Liam flinched as if I'd slapped him. Robert suddenly found the bottom of his glass very interesting. I told you, Liam stammered, his hands fidgeting with his napkin. It was an investment. I transferred it to HI Holdings. I was going to surprise you with the returns. HI Holdings, I read from the sheet. An offshore entity. I looked at Robert. Robert, what is HI Holdings? Robert didn't answer. He was sweating profusely now, beads of perspiration gathering on his upper lip. I'll tell you what it is, I said. It's a personal debt consolidation account. Yours, Robert. It's where you hide money to pay off your gambling debts. I looked back at Liam. You didn't invest in the company, Liam. You paid off your father-in-law's bookie. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away. Liam froze, his eyes darting to Robert. What? Liam whispered. No, that's not right. Robert said it was for a bridge loan. He said the liquidity was low because of the merger, and if I put cash in now, I'd get equity shares worth triple that amount next month. He turned to Robert, his voice rising in panic. Robert, tell her it was for equity. Robert sighed, a long, ragged sound. He wiped his face with his napkin. Liam, look, the market is volatile, the shares, they were going to be issued once the stabilization period was over. There is no stabilization period. I slammed my hand on the table. The company is insolvent, Robert. You knew that. You knew the merger with Global Link was the only thing saving you from bankruptcy. And you still took my son's money, my money, knowing you could never pay it back. Liam stared at his father-in-law. The realization washed over him like a bucket of ice water. He hadn't just been a thief. He had been a mark, a sucker. The Harringtons hadn't welcomed him because they liked him. They hadn't welcomed him because he was worthy. They had welcomed him because he was desperate to please, and he had access to a mother who had saved every penny for 20 years. You played me, Liam said, his voice trembling. You told me I was part of the family. You are family, Robert said weakly. Families help each other out. Help? Liam stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I stole from my mother. I stole from my mother for you. Liam's scream didn't just break the polite atmosphere of the garden room. It shattered it into 1,000 irreparable shards. The sound echoed off the glass walls, bouncing between the ferns and the horrified faces of the other diners. At a table nearby, a woman dropped her fork, the metal clatter sounding like a gunshot in the sudden silence. I sat perfectly still, my hands clasped over the folder. I watched my son. He was standing over his father-in-law, his chest heaving, his face a mask of betrayal and dawning horror. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a long, beautiful dream to find himself in a burning building. "Keep your voice down, you idiot!" Robert hissed, looking around frantically, his face glistening with a sheen of cold sweat. "We can fix this. It's a liquidity issue. A misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Liam laughed, but it was a broken, jagged sound. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect styling he had spent an hour on that morning. "She knows, Robert. She has the logs. You took the money, my mom's money, and you gambled it away?" "I was managing risk," Robert shot back, his voice rising in a desperate defense. "And don't act so high and mighty, Liam. You gave me the codes. You wanted the shortcut. You wanted to be a VP without doing the work. Because you told me that's how it worked," Liam yelled, tears finally spilling over his eyelids. "You told me I was special." "Oh, shut up, Liam." The new voice cut through the argument like a whip. We all turned to look at Chloe. She had taken off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were wide with panic, not for us, but for herself. "This is pathetic," she spat, glaring at her husband. "You're crying? Seriously? Daddy is trying to handle business and you're making a scene because you lost a little money? You're supposed to be a man, Liam. Fix it." Liam stared at her. He looked at the woman he had vowed to cherish less than 24 hours ago. He looked at the woman who had demanded gold cufflinks and called his mother a pig. And for the first time, I saw the veil lift from his eyes. He didn't see a princess. He saw a spoiled, empty shell. "A little money?" Liam whispered, his voice trembling. "Chloe, that was everything. That was my mother's life savings. And your father stole it." "So what?" Chloe rolled her eyes, crossing her arms over her chest. "She's the CEO now, isn't she? She's rich. She can afford it. Why are you making this about morals? It's just money. God, you really are a peasant at heart." The word hung in the air. Peasant. I saw something break inside Liam then. His shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him, replaced by a crushing weight of shame. He slowly turned his head to look at me. I hadn't moved. I hadn't spoken. I was just watching, witnessing the inevitable collapse of the house of cards they had built on my back. "Mom," Liam said. His voice was barely audible. He looked young again. He looked like the 7-year-old who had broken a neighbor's window and was terrified to come home. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear." I looked at him. My heart was aching, throbbing with a physical pain that made it hard to breathe. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to tell him it would be okay, that I would write a check, that we would fix it together like we always did. But then I remembered the bathroom mirror. I remembered the text message. "Fix it. Now." I remembered the way he looked at his shoes while I was being humiliated. If I saved him now, I would lose him forever. I would be enabling the very weakness that had led him here. "Sit down, Liam," I said quietly. He hesitated, then slowly sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone cold, but the bitterness was grounding. I opened the folder again, smoothing the pages with a deliberate calmness that I knew was terrifying Robert. "Here is what is going to happen," I announced. My voice was the only sound at the table. Even Chloe fell silent, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. I looked at Robert. "Robert, you are going to resign. Effective immediately. I have typed up the letter for you." I pulled a single sheet of paper from the back of the folder and slid it across the table. "You will cite health reasons. It's dignified. It saves face. And it saves you from a prison sentence." Robert stared at the paper. His hands were shaking so badly he had to grip the table edge to steady them. And if I don't sign? Then I hand this folder to the forensic auditors waiting in the lobby," I said simply. "And then I call the district attorney. Embezzlement, fraud, theft. You'll die in prison, Robert. Do you want that legacy for your daughter? Robert paled. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a gold fountain pen, probably paid for with company funds, and uncapped it. He signed the paper without reading it. He pushed it back to me, defeated. Done, he whispered. Good, I said, filing the resignation letter away. Now, regarding the $50,000. I turned my gaze to Liam. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the tablecloth, his tears making dark spots on the white linen. That money was stolen, I said. It was unauthorized. Regardless of what lies Robert told you, Liam, you pressed the button. You entered the code. You are an accomplice to felony theft. Liam flinched. Mom, don't, please. I'm giving you a choice, Liam, I continued, my voice steady, though my insides were screaming. Option A, I file the police report. You and Robert can share a cell. You can explain to the judge how you were just following orders. No! Liam looked up, panic wild in his eyes. Mom, you can't! I'm your son! Option B, I interrupted him. You pay it back. I can't, he cried. I don't have it. You know I don't have it. I spent my savings on the honeymoon deposits. I have nothing. I know, I said, which brings me to the terms of your repayment. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. You are going to work it off. Work? Chloe scoffed. He's a vice president. Not anymore, I said, not even looking at her. Liam, on Monday morning at 6 a.m., you will report to the Global Link main warehouse on 4th Street. You will not be in the office. You will be on the floor. You will be loading trucks. Liam's jaw dropped. The loading dock? Mom, I have a degree in art history. And that degree has served you very well in identifying the artistic value of the money you stole, I said coldly. But it won't help you lift boxes. The starting pay is $18 an hour. We will garnish 70% of your wages until the $50,000, plus interest, is repaid. That will take years, Liam protested. Then you better get started, I said. And Liam? You won't be living in the penthouse. You can't afford it. I suggest you find a studio apartment. Or maybe, I glanced at Chloe, maybe your wife's family can support you? Oh, wait. Robert is unemployed now, and Chloe has lost her car. I stood up. The movement felt final. I picked up the folder, clutching it to my chest like a shield. Those are the terms, I said, looking down at the wreckage of their brunch. Be at the warehouse at 6 a.m. Monday. If you are 1 minute late, or if you don't show up, I file the police report. Mom, Liam stood up again, reaching for my hand. Mom, please, don't leave me here with them. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can I come home? Can I stay with you until I get back on my feet? I looked at his hand. It was reaching out, just like it used to when he was a toddler and wanted to cross the street. It would be so easy to take it, to pull him into a hug, to drive him home, to make him soup and tell him it was all a bad dream. It was the instinct of a lifetime. But then I looked at his wrist. He was wearing the gold cufflinks, the ones Chloe chose, the ones that didn't clash with the aesthetic. He hadn't taken them off, even now. I took a step back, out of his reach. No, Liam, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. You can't come home, because you burned it down. Mom, you wanted to be a man worthy of the Harringtons, I said. Now you have the chance to be a man worthy of yourself, but you're going to have to do it alone, just like I did. I turned away. Mom, wait. I didn't wait. I walked away from the table, past the fountain, past the staring guests. My legs felt like jelly, but I kept my head high. I could hear Chloe screaming at Robert in the background. I could hear Liam sobbing. I walked out of the garden room and into the lobby. The heavy glass doors of the St. Regis swung shut behind me, sealing the chaos of the garden room inside. The sound of Chloe's shrill accusations and Robert's pathetic stammering was instantly cut off, replaced by the hushed, reverent silence of the hotel lobby. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking on the marble floor with a rhythm that felt different now. It was no longer the march of an executioner. It was the steady, grounded pace of a survivor. The valet brought my car around, my sensible 5-year-old sedan. He held the door open for me with a newfound respect, perhaps sensing the shift in my aura. I slid into the driver's seat. the familiar fabric embracing me. As I turned the key, I didn't look back at the hotel. I didn't look up at the windows of the honeymoon suite. I put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving the Harringtons and my son to sort through the rubble of their own making. The drive home was a blur of gray highway and white noise. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house looked small compared to the estate I had just left. But as I walked through the front door, smelling the lingering scent of my own laundry detergent and old books, it felt like a palace. It felt like mine. I placed the silver pocket watch on the nightstand next to my bed. It ticked softly in the quiet room. "Not yet," I whispered to the ghost of my husband. "He's not ready for you yet. But maybe one day." I didn't hear from Liam for the rest of the weekend. I didn't call him. I didn't check my bank account to see if he was trying to access it again. I knew the locks held. I spent Sunday gardening, pulling weeds with a ferocity that left my hands raw and my mind clear. I was preparing myself for Monday. Monday morning arrived with a steel gray sky. I was in my office at Global Link Logistics by 5:30 a.m. My office was on the top floor, a glass-walled sanctuary overlooking the sprawling complex of the distribution center. From here, I could see everything. The trucks lining up at the bays, the forklifts buzzing like yellow worker bees, and the main entrance gate where the shift workers arrived. I sat at my desk, a mug of black coffee steaming in front of me. On my computer screen, I had pulled up the live feed from security camera 4. The camera pointed directly at the employee time clock near the loading dock. 5:45 a.m. The regulars started trickling in. Men and women in steel-toed boots and high-visibility vests, carrying thermoses and lunch pails. They laughed, clapped each other on the back, complaining about the weather. These were my people, the people who built this company. 5:50 a.m. No sign of him. I felt a tightening in my chest. Had he run? Had he convinced Chloe to take him back? Had Robert found some hidden stash of cash to bail him out? If he didn't show up, I would have to make good on my threat. I would have to file the police report. The thought made me nauseous, but I gripped the handle of my mug, steeling myself. "Don't blink, Mary. Don't you dare blink." 5:55 a.m. Still nothing. 5:58 a.m. The foreman, a burly man named Miller who took no nonsense, was checking his clipboard, looking at the empty slot in the line. Then, at 5:59 a.m., the heavy metal door creaked open. A figure walked in. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He wasn't wearing the Italian loafers he loved so much. He was wearing a pair of stiff, new work boots that looked uncomfortable, old jeans that he used to paint in, and a plain gray t-shirt. It was Liam. He looked terrible. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. His hair was unstyled and flat, and he looked smaller somehow, stripped of the arrogance that had puffed him up for the last year. He stood in the doorway for a second, looking around at the noise, the grime, the sheer reality of the warehouse. He looked like a deer who had wandered into a wolf den. Miller barked something at him, pointing to the time clock. I watched on the screen as my son, the vice president of strategic operations, fumbled with his new ID badge. He swiped it. Beep. 6:10 a.m. exactly. He was clocked in. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, my shoulders sagging with relief. He had shown up. He had chosen the hard road. I watched for another hour. I watched as Miller assigned him to the unloading bay, the hardest job on the floor. I watched Liam struggle with the first box. It was heavy. He stumbled, almost dropping it. Some of the other guys laughed. The old Mary would have called down to the floor. "Go easy on him, he's new." The CEO, Mary, took a sip of coffee and watched. He regained his balance. He lifted the box. He put it on the pallet. Then he went back for another one. And another one. By noon, I received a notification from HR. The paperwork for the wage garnishment had been signed by Liam Vance. No arguments, no negotiations. The weeks that followed were a revelation. News travels fast. I heard through the grapevine that Chloe had filed for an annulment 3 days after the wedding. Apparently, a husband who loads trucks for $18 an hour didn't fit her aesthetic. Robert Harrington sold his estate to cover his legal fees and moved to a small condo in Florida to avoid the shame. The empire had crumbled the moment the truth touched it. And Liam? He didn't quit. For the first month, he was a ghost. He worked his shifts, went to the small studio apartment he had rented, without my help, and slept. He didn't call me. I didn't call him. We existed in the same building, separated by 5 floors and a lifetime of necessary silence. Then about 6 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday, I was walking to my car in the parking lot. "Mom?" I turned. Liam was standing near the employee exit. He was wearing his high-vis vest covered in dust. He had lost weight. His hands were rough, calloused, and stained with grease. But when he looked at me, his eyes were clear. The evasiveness was gone. The panic was gone. "Hi, Liam," I said, keeping my distance. He paused, looking down at his boots, then back up at me. "I just wanted to tell you that the check for the first installment clears tomorrow. It's not much, but it's mine." "I know," I said. "I saw the payroll report." And he swallowed hard. "I wanted to say thank you." I raised an eyebrow. "Thank you? I garnished your wages and made you a loader." "I know." He gave a tired, small smile. "But you stopped me. If you had bailed me out again, I think I would have disappeared completely. I would have become one of them." He looked at his hands, the working hands of a man earning his keep. "Chloe left," he said. "I heard." "It hurts," he admitted, "but not as much as I thought it would. I think I was in love with the reflection she showed me, not the woman." He took a deep breath. "I better go. I have the early shift tomorrow. But maybe when the debt is paid down a bit more, could I buy you a coffee? With my own money?" I felt the tears prick my eyes then, hot and sudden. But this time, they were tears of pride. Not the hollow pride of a mother watching her son pretend to be a prince, but the fierce pride of watching him become a man. "I take my coffee black, Liam," I said, my voice thick. "Don't be late." "I won't," he said. And for the first time in years, I believed him. As I drove home that night, the rain drumming a steady rhythm on the roof, I thought about the insult that started it all. A pig, a peasant. They had meant to break me with those words. They had meant to shame me into silence. But they forgot one thing about peasants. We know how to plant seeds in the dirt. We know how to weather the storm. And we know that the only things that truly grow are the things you nurture with truth, hard work, and sometimes a little bit of tough love. I looked at the passenger seat. The velvet box with the silver pocket watch was there. I had taken it out of the drawer this morning. I wasn't going to give it to him yet. He wasn't ready. But he was getting there. One box, one shift, one honest dollar at a time. So that is my story. It wasn't the wedding I dreamed of, and it certainly wasn't the honeymoon Liam expected. But sometimes life has to burn down the fantasy so you can build something real on the ashes. To anyone out there feeling underappreciated, insulted, or used by the people you love, remember this. Your dignity is not a negotiation. Your self-worth is not a currency you trade for affection. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop saving them from the consequences of their own actions. Because if you keep catching them, they'll never learn how to fly, or in Liam's case, how to lift. What do you think? Did I go too hard on him? Should I have let him off the hook? Or was the warehouse exactly what he needed? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. I have plenty more stories from the corporate world that will shock you. Until next time, keep your head high, keep your accounts secure, and never ever let anyone treat you like you don't belong at the head table.